engineer for program delivery. He sent you the letter and two-part analysis, which we can walk through together if you'd like. I have Derek Luer with us. He's our state traffic safety engineer. He represents what we've seen around the state and can give context and understanding to how we look at intersections, how we look at road segments from a safety perspective. He oversees the state, and he's also very active on the national scene. He can walk us through the two-year crash analysis, which we did as a part of this study on the south end of town. We also have with us today Lieutenant Struntz with the State Patrol, and if you would like, he can provide information on the two recent serious and fatal injury crash and what contributing factors that we could talk to at this time, if you so choose. Additionally, in the audience here, I have Scott Thompson. He's our district traffic engineer, and if there's specific questions that he can address, we'll have him do that. And also Ann Wolf, our public engagement coordinator, who has been working with the community for over a year now. Would you like to share observations, or would you like to have us run through the information at a high level, not trying to just so everybody has a broad understanding of the information that we've been able to develop as a part of our study?
Okay, thank you for those introductions. Council wished to just go over at a high level, and then we can pinpoint questions, or how would you like to say yes? Okay, sounds good, thank you.
All right, I'll have Zach Tess. You can run through the information that we've provided you.
Yeah, thanks for having us here this evening. And again, we look forward to the dialogue as it relates to the south end of town and some of the concerns that we're seeing and maybe some of the observations you are seeing. So provided a letter dated November 14th that kind of summarizes two different studies. Just again, trying to keep it relatively high level with those main points. But again, if there's questions, we can deep dive in some of those study information. So we looked at the 2 years prior to the 3-lane striping conversion on the south end of town, that runs from Highway 71 all the way up to 6th Street. And we looked at, again, about the same time frame, about 2 years post that striping conversion. As part of that, we've seen a 17% reduction in injury-related crashes. 7 of those crashes occurred in the pre-conversion scenario, 6 in the post-conversion scenario, which includes last week's fatality crash since that roadway was restriped. There has been an increase in total number of crashes, primarily located at intersections, typically due to that failure to yield, not necessarily appearing to be tied to some of the through-lane striping. Those additional crashes, that post-conversion phase, 23 of the 24 crashes in this 2-year period are actually intersection-related and not segment-related. One of the items you'll see in that study of concern to us is speeds on the south end of town. So just outside of town, just south of 71, the majority of traffic, over 60%, are driving in the 68 to 78 mile per hour range. And so there's some concerns from our perspective that's maybe leading to some judgment concerns around distance and how fast folks are coming into town. So again, that's something we'd be interested in talking about tonight if that's also a concern you guys are seeing as well. In this summary letter, I include, we could talk about specifics with signage or enforcement, concept from the corridor study, such as roundabout at that intersection of 71 and 60. And then, Mayor, I believe you asked us also to talk about the signal at 10th Street associated with costs. And again, we've got some options there which we can discuss as well, but I wonder if I should just pause right now and we talk about the 3-lane, 4-lane conversation before moving to the signal, if that's helpful.
I do think that'd be appropriate, one issue at a time here. Do you have a note for me, Steve? Just when you get to it, about speed. Yeah. The one interesting thing from my perspective that really caught my eye, and I believe the council has said, the residents have said, is the speed coming in from the south. We notice that, we understand that, and it's also the ramping up of speed, in my opinion, to get out of town. You know, looking both ways. I think it's very obvious to me. You know, our patrolmen do what they can. The city has budgeted for the blinking lights of speed as vehicles come into town. And with the discussion on cost sharing, later we'll talk about the stoplights. But with those blinking lights, and we budgeted substantial dollars to that, to install them, why aren't we cost sharing that as well? That's a question that I would have. You know, it seems that you've acknowledged the speed is an issue. We understand it's an issue. And the alternative, you know, also is a roundabout, which I'd like to hear your comments on of, are we still scheduled out 10 years from now? That makes a difference because these lights, the flashing speed light radars can be installed fairly soon, but the roundabout, my understanding, is down the line a ways. It's not going to happen in the near future. So I think those radar signals need to be installed, and my question will stand on, can we cost that as well? Because I think it's a concern you've pointed out as well. Those are my initial comments, I guess, on the first one, and then if you could answer those and then maybe move on to the other council members. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think the two comments raised were around your speed signs, right, indicating what vehicles' driving speeds are. There's some opportunities here, both in a temporary condition where MnDOT has various trailers that could get installed temporarily. Then as it relates to the permanent configuration, I think we'd have to look at what we've typically done in the past, and I could look to our district traffic engineer here in the audience to give some guidance on that. I think we've done different things in different communities depending on what concerns we're seeing, as well as if it's just an opportunity-driven sort of item by other communities. As it relates to the second one, and again, we could get into this a little more, the corridor study. Yeah, no, sometimes I'm getting echo and sometimes I'm not. The corridor study had indicated a couple of different options at Highway 60 and Highway 71 as it related to intersection treatments, roundabouts being favorable. MnDOT does have various programs and solicitation opportunities where we could pursue something sooner than that, which we could talk about further here as it relates to some safety programs.
Follow up on that too, on the speed coming in. Is there any way we can lower the speed limit sooner? Back at southwest. Get them slowed down at the intersection where city limits start. That seems to be a opportunity just waiting to put in some speed limit signs that are further south. Now, will people still disobey them? Absolutely, you know, but it's not only the people coming in at a fast speed, it's the people coming from South 71 who pull up to that intersection. They take a look to their left and right, maybe back to the left, and by that time, these cars are approaching very fast. And I think some of your accident reports could be from the pulling out. And so that's why, you know, speed, I think, is just a huge thing here. And so we have multiple things that we've just talked about, would be the radar illumination deals, You know, and the question is, once again, is can we reduce the speed further to the south? It seems like it's an area that it's both visual, I would guess in the long-term solutions, you may look at something for the visibility there. I think they're coming around the curve at high rates of speeds, of which you mentioned, 68 or 63 to 78. You know, and I think that's just a huge thing in that intersection, and it makes for choices that have to be made by drivers in a quicker instance. And so, you know, that's how I feel. Council, I've made my comments. Council, Marv?
My question was, how much time is spent on site just watching the traffic as it goes on south out of Windom or coming in? Because I go out there quite a bit, going to Quick Trip, and it doesn't result in an accident, but semis will stop, park in the striped area. Because it's single lane, you're seeing lane changing quite a bit. Because the traffic is being stacked going out of town, our local trucking firm says it's impossible to make a left turn coming back to Windom, and he's a mile out because the traffic is stacked going out to Worthington. I was on 71 coming into town, and I had a lady move to the turn lane of 71, proceed through the 71 intersection, and turn into Quick Trip. And if I would have been just a little bit quicker on the draw, she would have hit me. I think the striping and making that, changing it from 4-lane to 2-lane is way too confusing for the way people drive currently. And I, along with all the citizens of Windom, would like to see that go back to the original design.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think you'd asked the question about observations. The study itself, and maybe I could turn to Derek to talk about some of this as well, did 48 hours of review in terms of counts and delay at intersections, which is sort of apart from the analysis. Again, really what we've been seeing over the last 2 years, 23 of 24 crashes are located at intersections, and not necessarily tied to the segments from what we're seeing. But Derek, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can comment on a few things. Do you want me to talk about the speed limit too?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll go to the speed limit first, if that's all right. So I don't know the exact speeds within the corridor there on the south end. I haven't seen the data itself, but one challenge we always face with changing a speed limit is that all we have done is change that sign, and we have not changed behavior at all. So what we have seen is you could change the speed limit to whatever number you want to, but people will continue to go, looking at the data here, 60, 65, 70 miles per hour into the city, regardless of what that speed limit sign says. And actually at intersections, this can be even more problematic, because what happens is you do have people who are rule followers, and they will drop their speed to that speed limit. And for drivers who are sitting on that side road trying to gauge how fast people are coming up, they could see somebody approaching at the speed limit, let's say it was 45 miles per hour, and they gauge that speed. And then if somebody else comes along who's going 68, 70 miles per hour, it's really hard for the human brain to be able to comprehend that correctly, and that can actually lead to more problems when we don't have the speed limit sign correctly. So just lowering the speed limit on its own usually does not fix any problems. So the second question was regarding, I'm sorry, just the some of the crash data? Is that what we wanted to talk about? Sorry.
Yeah, and maybe some of the delays of intersections.
What do we want to mention about the delays? Just go ahead. Oh, sorry.
What we've been seeing right now in terms of, and this is in that 3-lane viability memo, Appendix A. What we see right now, most delay is at Highway 60 and Highway 71 on the actually the Cindy Street approach that experiences in the PM peak, so that kind of during that hour evening peak, just shy of 20 seconds of delay where they're waiting. We know as that number starts to get higher, gap acceptance, risk tolerance change as well. That's sort of psychological, and so maybe that's some of what we're seeing at that intersection as well right now.
I'll add too, one of the things I caught in the crash analysis that you mentioned, Mayor, was the heading south after 10th Street. That's the last signal right before you get on the 4-lane expressway, before you can start really moving. Half of the crashes, about 5 out of the 11, were actually people running the red lights. So that would probably confirm some of your thoughts that, you know, people are eager to get through that signal and to move on, so. Yeah.
And then the other thing I was going to mention, around the quick trip access, which is actually also in this report. We know on average, Highway 60 through Windom has about 11 to 13,000 vehicles per day. Interestingly enough, a higher heavy commercial percentage than our traditional roadways in the area, right around that 25%. In the area of the quick trip intersection, and these grades are typically good letter grades. You know, A is very good, F is very bad. What we see for delay at that access, level of service A throughout that intersection. So there's not a substantial wait time getting in or out.
Marv?
You mentioned if you would lower the speed sign, that doesn't change public behavior. But can't the gentleman to your right change public behavior?
Yes, we can certainly change public behavior. I will add, though, the challenge with that area is obviously the terrain and making stops, congesting traffic more on the bridge or, you know, in the intersections. So I know our troopers that work this area do work Highway 60 in and around Windom a lot and try to reduce speeds as much as they can, yes.
One follow-up on this is, remember, we only have one lane coming in for probably a half a mile to the south. And you're down to one lane. How can all of this traffic be going that fast in that area? What's the percentage of people that follow the speed limit?
Yeah, so in the 4-lane area, right, back to sort of that high level point, 61% of motorists are driving between 68 and 78 miles per hour in the 4-lane section. Post-merge, so where we start to neck them down, we actually do see some speed reduction, though it's still relatively high. So again, still greater than half of motorists are driving between 62 and 72 miles per hour. So again, we see some reduction by going down from you know, the 2 northbound to 1 northbound.
Thank you. I'm going to let Jenny talk. She has a list of questions, so it might take a while. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay.
It's all in good. It's all good.
I'll try to just piece it so that I don't like hog all the time. But one of the things that you're talking about is, you know, in your report, and I read through, I mean, it was a very detailed, good report. When you talk about 60% of the motorists in the 65 zone are going, you know, on Highway 60 South, they're observed to be going between 68 and 78 miles an hour. I mean, that's very concerning to me on that speed coming in. And then you look at, you know, further in your study, you talk about the studies on roundabouts and how they reduce fatal and serious injury crashes by 80%. So to me, when you look at, hey, we have a big problem with the speeds out there, we know we have a problem with accidents, and then, you know, you're like, okay, with your studies, you know this can reduce things by 80%. Why would we wait very long to, you know, like, this is all your research saying this is the best thing to do. And so I feel like that's a no-brainer. We should be figuring out how to do that as soon as possible. The other thing that I just kind of want to point out, because I know statistics and numbers, you know, with the way you look at things, because when I looked at the report and just the summary talks about, well, there's a 17% reduction in injury crashes. And so you're saying pre-conversion, there were 7 injury accidents, and post-conversion, there were 6 injury accidents. So only one difference, and that's the 17%. But the one post, you know, there was a fatality. And like, to me, a fender bender and a fatality, you know, the ranking of those and the severity of how that impacts our community is huge. Also then, when you dig into your report further, and I think you kind of, you know, said that, but when you looked at the 2 years prior to the conversion, it revealed there were 12 crashes. And then when you look at the 2 years after the conversion, there were 24 crashes. Okay, so that's double the amount of crashes. I know it's not as many serious injuries that, you know, that you're reporting. I think the it was like 58% of the 12 had involved an injury, and in the post, 24 of the crashes, you had 25% had injury. Well, and then, you know, how do you define injury? But any injury is bad. But I just look at, you know, we have 12 crashes before this restriping happened, and then we have 24 crashes after this restriping. And I totally agree when you talk about the intersection-related things and that failure to yield, kind of what your report said. And I really think it is that people are frustrated with their wait times. I mean, people are not used to when they go out for supper at Hardee's, Subway, McDonald's, something out there, and they're coming across Cindy Street to get onto the highway, having to wait that long because of all that traffic coming at a high speed. And they sit there and people get frustrated, and I think that's when we have that, we'll call it fail to yield. I think they yielded and they waited for so long, they just are like, okay, I'm gonna chance it, I'm gonna go. And I keep whenever I talk to people around town, I'm like, that 5 or 10 more seconds you have to wait, it's not worth your life. You know, we have to keep getting that education out there. I think that's a huge piece. But anything we can do to try to cut down the traffic speed out there, and also just acknowledging that we've got double the crashes. Yes, maybe not as many injuries, but one injury is, you know, and especially a fatality is just too many. So that's just my comment on the striping piece.
I'd like to just add a follow-up. Jenny brought a good point up, is sooner the better for the roundabout, and I think you would agree with that. Is there any chance of expedited funding to get that done in the more recent future?
Yeah, so MnDOT has a highway safety improvement plan where there's various solicitations. In fact, it's out right now, I think, Derek, for delivery likely in about 2028, maybe as early as 2027, depending on how things align, depending on community interest and support for something like that. The fatality from 2 weeks ago makes this rise higher on that list of intersections of concern. And so it would be of interest for District 7 to pursue that solicitation depending on city interest.
That's the best news I've heard so far. Thank you. Scott?
I'm old school, so you're not gonna get no big words out of me. So what you guys are telling me, even with your old studies, that you got 4 lanes coming into town and would you say 13 million people coming through per day? Or 13,000 coming through on 4 lane, summing it down to 1. You get the funnel type thing. So you got all them people coming through one shot, both ways, and you want people to try to go across that. That's asking for trouble. I mean, and when I was just started on the council, this was supposed to be, the striping stuff was supposed to be temporary to see if it worked anything in. And what I was told then, if it didn't work, we could ask for it back, our 4 lane back, and we asked for a 4 lane back, and we still haven't got it. We've had citizens come up time and time and time again saying, we want our 4 lane back, please. They've asked nicely, they've asked angrily, they've asked many different ways. And all we ask for is just a chance to get that back, because from my common sense, you got 4 lanes going all the way from Iowa all the way up to Canada. And in Windom's the only place you run it down to one lane through there. And you got all them people coming through, trucks, cars, and whether they're driving good, bad, indifferent, they're still driving at a high rate of speed, like you said, and you're funneling it through town. They go through town that way. I've seen that happen many different times. Those intersections ain't the only ones having problems. We're having problems all the way through town with people trying to get across, trying to judge it, trying to just take their chance to get across, because just go to the stoplights. Even you see people going through the stoplights, and where's the safe intersection to go through? You got kids trying to do this stuff too. New drivers, old drivers. I'm an old driver. I'm not as good as I used to be. But I'm just saying, with a fatality, that's terrible. But if we don't do something, we're gonna have many more, and we're a small town. We ain't got the big funding that some of these bigger cities do. So that's why we're trying to ask nicely, and we're trying to do the best we can, and without being angrily or doing silly things. We just ask, why can't we get it back, especially when it's a temporary basis, we thought. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah, this is Zach again. Tied to sort of the two statements made. As it relates to the 2 years worth of crash data, one of the things we're always, I say, cautious about is we generally try to look at trends typically across 5 years or 10 years. That's just due to the general nature of the widespread and infrequent nature that crashes are. And so then generally those trends, and Derek could probably talk about this a little more, give us more confidence associated with what's happening. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can, get this closer. I can talk a little bit too about kind of what we see generally as trends across the state too, as far as crashes and some of these intersections, especially like this intersection we have at 60 and 71. I know 3 lanes are going back down to the 2 lane, or going back to the 4 lanes seems very intuitive that would be better. Typically what we see with most intersections, especially in urbanized areas, is more lanes, more problems. It makes it trickier for drivers to deal with 4 lanes, trying to gauge speeds and trying to guess gaps. But also, as you saw in the speed report too, when we switched from the 4 lane down to the 2 lane there, we saw a 6 mile per hour drop in speed. So usually one of the best ways we can maintain speeds is to have fewer lanes. So one of the other big things that we've seen across the state too, and one thing that we try to do a lot of analysis and looking at where fatal crashes occur. And one of the strongest correlations we find is where there's commercial development. So when we see something like Quick Trip come in, that can ultimately change the patterns of traffic in the area. And that could be one of the things that's really resulting in a change out there for the traffic patterns. So the 2 lane may have something to do with it, but the commercial development and the change in the way people drive out there is probably one of the stronger things that's changing the way the behavior works out there.
And just to that second point, so there's 2 years worth pre, 2 years post. There's been some commercial development that would have caused some trip generation change. Additionally, we saw some, just following the pandemic, numbers of reduced, what we call VMT, vehicle miles traveled. Those numbers are back up now too, so there's higher trips as well, just on the corridor itself.
I guess the thing I would add to that, it's not that commercial development is bad, it changes the characteristics of the traffic in the area. So think, when we take a look at this information that's been provided to, that we asked for and we received, we are spending a lot of time ourselves and being able to talk with you here today about what are some of the things that we could do to impact that. So we want to make sure that we're not disparaging a commercial development, but now that changed the characteristics of the traffic in the area and the volume of turning movements in the area. So how can we react and respond to that? So.
And then just lastly, to the point about the 11 to 13,000, I know during the past year we had talked about, and this is prior to the city's, resolution not in support of the 3 lane through town. We provided some scenarios or case studies of, vehicles that had less than Windom vehicles, or roads that had more than Windom. Derek's here tonight with some others examples, if that's helpful to talk about other communities that have substantially higher volumes too. So, but if that's fine, if not as well.
one thing I forgot to mention earlier is, we're not only dealing with Windom traffic, it's the through traffic, and a lot of that are community members that are outside city limits. A lot of truck and trailer livestock that I believe, and I didn't read your study that detailed, but I would say that there just seems to be a lot more truck trailer type traffic through town. And the one bad intersection that I see is, and this was terrible during the flooding, is coming off of 62 and making that right-hand turn south was absolutely a nightmare for people. And truckers would call me up and say, when is Windom going to get this fixed? And they have to make a wide turn. They cannot make it in a single take a right. They have to veer out into that center lane. And when they do that, that backs up into the intersection of the lights by McDonald's and just multiplies the different factors there, which, I believe that the 4-lane as it was running through Windom, it seems so much easier to navigate from our town perspective, and I did you have numbers on the amount of semi-traffic coming through town compared to cars? And did that increase, over the, once we made it 4-lane? And I stress, we made it 4-lane legislatively?
Yeah, the information I have is just more recent. So associated with the study, I think we quoted a number of about 22% heavy commercial vehicles, so almost 1 out of 4. We take counts every year where we count the vehicles themselves as well as the heavy commercial vehicles, which includes a number of classifications. Some of those older numbers showed above 25% even in the last 3-4 years as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm of the opinion that this new configuration of the one-lane lane is a total failure. I'd say 98% of the citizens of Windom would agree with that. I know they would. I have had nobody, maybe one person from out of town that supported it. One person. Everybody else says this has to be stopped. Think about it. Coming in, pulling out of Quick Trip. If that was a 4-lane, the cars pulling out would stay in the right lane. The traffic coming in would be in the left lane. It would avoid a crash. Now when you got one lane, there's a crash. I know you did an extensive study. I'd like to know how much that cost. I'm sure you could tell me. You probably won't, but I'd like to know what that study cost. Go ahead.
To verify, are we talking these two studies?
The studies you just did.
We'll have to follow up and send an email to Mr. Nasby. I don't actually have the numbers off the top of my head.
I would appreciate seeing those numbers.
Yeah, the contract that we have with this consulting firm includes a number of things, including these studies. So
Okay.
we can parse out that information and follow up with it. Additionally, and again, depending on how far we want to go into some of these things, Derek has some information associated with what I call conflict points and some diagrams that might be helpful as part of this conversation, if that's of council interest.
That report was helpful. There was things I agreed with in it. All the charts and stuff didn't mean nothing to me, but it was a bunch of nothing to me. But I'm sure it meant something to you. But that's fine.
Yeah, and just a sort of a fun fact. A lot of those charts at the end are just auto-produced products from simulated models. So, the bulk of the pages are just kind of like click a button, it generates a report. So it's not the meat of it, but it's just the background data. So that part doesn't cost as much.
Jim, turn your mic.
Yeah, Chris, was it? Yes, okay. I think that 6-mile-an-hour delay is probably confusion, personally, that's what I think. When they first see it, and they see that what they're coming into, and they don't know, I'm not gonna say that word, what they should do, I think a lot of that is right there. It's plain just confusion. And to Zach, you said it's a 48-hour study? Actual study, 48 hours worth.
Yeah, that's when we took the count-related information, the classification information, as well as some of that near-miss data.
Okay, the state people I see working are highway patrol, that's about it, except for snow in the wintertime. On a holiday weekend or something like that for 2 or days before, it's crazy. I've seen it where you couldn't get across, period. If we didn't know where the stop signs were or how to get to the stoplight, we wouldn't have been able to get from one side of town to the other. And it's not just one holiday, it's every holiday. It's like that, and it's well, ridiculous, I think. Another thing is that if you go out there, last night it was raining quite hard. And if you drive out there, you couldn't see 1 line, 2 lines, or you couldn't see. Maybe if they're fluorescent, you might be able to, but I doubt it. You couldn't see them at all. I think that, you know, and another thing is that we had, the co-op was out there for years, and they never had any problems with the way it was. People were coming in and out. As far as getting into Quick Trip for gas, fuel, or whatever, the truckers, they can turn on 71. There's a driveway right there that goes in. I see a lot of them are starting to use it, actually. And they wouldn't have to stop and try to go in from off the Highway 60 and 71. I don't know. I think that something different could have been done. And the striping is absolutely of no use as far as I'm concerned.
I would like to ask Lieutenant a question if I could. I hate to see you sitting there not participating. But, you know, in your opinion, are there more close calls that you've seen out here that are not recorded?
I guess I don't know. I don't generally work in this area. I supervise this area, so I'd have to talk to the troopers that do work this area every day. So I guess I don't know if there's close calls or not.
I was just gonna go to that because our chief of police is here too. And I wanted to compare the answers, is what I wanted to do. Because, you know, we have talked with chief, we went through the budget cycle. He says, we gotta get these radar flashing lights up. We gotta give them something to see that says they're going too darn fast. And our policemen have other things to do besides patrolling the highways. You know, they're 2 people on during the a day. They have many other things to do throughout the community. And some, you know how it is with priorities, you go to where you have to positively be. And, you know, I would love to have 2 patrolmen sit, one on the south, one on the north, and sit there all day long, and let's start ticketing people. Let's get the message out, just like it did. And I very seldom see people speed when they go through Lake Crystal. And granted, that's 50 miles an hour, which seems fast, but people are trained in that community. How do we get there? I don't know the answer, right? But I know our police, I've seen them, I've seen the highway patrol stop people and stop people. I've seen them stopped on both ends of town at the same time, just recently. And you look at that, and are the visitors that are traveling through our community just not paying attention? How do we get that out there? And I think our chief is on the target. We got to get them signs up with the cost share proposal with MnDOT. That's what Scott says. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands is we don't fault enforcement, whether it's the state patrol or your local folks. It's, when you see, what was surprising to us is when you see the sheer number of people that are in that accelerated speed limit, they feel comfortable doing that, and it's a behavior that, you know, we'll get into some of these solutions that you're talking about, but what is, I really appreciate is just hearing from everybody, I truly do. Even if we don't agree, I do appreciate hearing from you and so that we can work together to move forward on hopefully some solutions that will help that. But again, it's that individual driver behavior, and it's when in the work that we do with Towards Zero Deaths, you are continuing to see, we've already surpassed the number of fatalities from last year at this time. So we're unfortunately going in the wrong direction, and we are statewide, and that we are still seeing speed and distracted driver, and I think that and alcohol impaired driver. I think our worry and concern is that the distracted driver, and it is so random that. That's why and Derek can talk to this a little bit more, is why we prefer the channelization, so people are looking at one lane and making a decision as to when to enter into traffic in one lane. If there's something else we can do with those intersections, understood, sir, I got understood. If there's something else we can do, we could sure take a look at that to help and support that. But again, that the speed was really quite concerning for us. So, Derek,
I'd like to bring up one other thing that I think is very important. You know, it's been brought up by our fire department and the difficulty that they're having when they go out on calls south. People are not getting out of their way. They don't understand where they should go because there's just one lane of traffic there. And it's been a nightmare for them, and it's delaying them on getting to fires. It's serious. I'm a firm believer, put it back the way it was. That's the last I'm going to say, but I'm a firm believer, put it back the way it was.
I think I'll just say a lot of our council and future council members, you'll hear that same thing. So I want to give Senator Weber an opportunity. If you have any questions, Senator, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I'd like to do that. You know that.
Well, you know, elected officials never pass up an open mic, but anyway. I do have a couple questions that I'd like to ask based on the letters that you've provided me copies of and things that I've heard here this evening. There was a statement made that when the striping on the south part of Highway 6071 was changed from 4-lane to 2 lanes plus the turn lane, that they understood that it was temporary and that it could be changed back. Is that what was offered to the city at the time before the change was made?
Yeah, I think we called it an opportunity and a trial because we were just completing a corridor study that looked at various elements associated with an upcoming reconstruction project, and we saw it as an opportunity with commercial development coming in to assess its performance.
Okay, thank you. Another item that your study, you talked about the 2 years prior to the change, striping change, and 2 years after. I would assume that the majority of the 2 years after was after the closing of the pork plant, correct? The 2 years after would have been 23 and 24 essentially. Yeah. And the pork plant closed in April of '24. Initial April, June, totally out. Or '23, excuse me, '23. So, you know, in looking at the traffic and number one, you have a reduction of trailers bringing live hogs into the plant. You have a reduction of trucks hauling the finished product out. Yeah, I question, is that a fair comparison, those 2-year increments? Because I think that there had to have been, and I don't know what the numbers are, but there had to have been a reduction of truck traffic due to the closing of that plant at that point.
Yeah, the post-conversion period looked at October 1st of 2022 to November 9th of 2024, so a little over 2 years. Again, based on this 48 hours of video, we had about 22% heavy commercial vehicles in those higher classifications. We'd have to go back and look at the past couple of years. I recall the 2023 information that I believe I cited earlier. That was upwards of 25% heavy commercial vehicles. And again, that we're sort of talking two numbers, and maybe this is a little too detailed. There's the 48-hour count that we performed as part of this study, and then there's something we do to average that over the course of the whole year, because we know certain months are a little higher, certain months are a little lower. And so again, that number from 2023 is that higher number. We'd have to go back and look at 2022, 2021 as well, but I don't have that information tonight.
And I guess my hometown is Laverne, and we went through this when South Highway 75 a few years ago. I don't know, 3-4 years ago, I would assume it is. You know, I don't hear much about it anymore because people figure, why talk about it? But I would guess if they had the opportunity, most of the people would be willing to go back to the way it was as well. And I see people that pass in the turn lane simply because, as my dad used to refer to them as the Sunday drivers going down the traffic lane and slowing the traffic down, and people get frustrated and it's against the law and it's a mistake, but you know, it's quite frankly, that's what all accidents are generally mistakes that have happened. And so, you know, having lived with it, I tend to agree with the city council members here tonight. And Mr. Ose and I have talked about that issue before. But as it relates to the striping and that type of thing, okay, the next final question. If it's the city's request that it go back to the 4-lane situation, how soon would that happen?
I think one of the questions I would ask back is how concerned are we with speeds, and how concerned are we with crashes and severity of crashes? Generally what we're seeing from statewide analyses, including would indicate to do that would be contrary to those two goals. And so we would want to talk through that sort of an eyes wide open kind of conversation on, do we want faster speeds through town? Do we want increased severity of crashes? Do you want to characterize it differently?
Well, I excuse me. That is the conversation, because when you open it up, and then that's our concern, is that you reduce what you call was confusion, we call friction. And that friction has a tendency for people to not feel as comfortable and hopefully reduce their speed. I mean, well, again, sir, I understand, but those are, you know, and Derek can talk to this from a safety perspective, but those are some of the things that we're looking at. And we understand the folks that feel like when they're coming out of the quick trip, if they can get into the right-hand lane, they feel comfortable. But that doesn't mean there isn't another vehicle in the right-hand lane. So, anyhow, if Derek, if you have anything to add from that perspective as to that's one of our concerns about opening it back up to 4 lanes, is we're having trouble reducing the speed now. If we open it up to 4 lanes, it opens it up to even less friction and would the speeds come down. We don't disagree with the your speed is sign. We don't disagree with doing different things to try to bring the speeds down. And at some point in here, we'd like to talk to you about a future intersection modification at 61 and 70, 60 and 71 South. But we sure did want to hear from everybody first, and for you to, and to tell us what you are telling us so that we hear that, and we want you to know that your voice is heard. So,
Well, and we thank you for that. The thing that I'm questioning now is, you know, we talked about the roundabout, potentially earlier than we originally thought, right? At that time, are you building a 2-lane roundabout with the turnoff lane? Or are we just gonna have 2 lanes? Single lanes.
Yeah, I think we'd have to talk through the trade-offs associated with the 2 alternatives from that corridor study. It showed both options. It talked about different safety reduction factors, and we would want to, again, go in eyes wide open, talking through both those options with the community.
Because it sure seems to me that you would not come in from the south with 1 lane and convert to a 2-lane roundabout. Okay, that's what I'm not understanding, is because you will reduce speed with a roundabout, right? That's a guarantee. They're gonna see the roundabout signs, flashing lights, you got a roundabout coming up. And to me, there's plenty of room out there. It appears. You're the judges of that. You make a 4-lane roundabout, there is no reason that I see not to open it up to 4-lane, in my opinion. Another thing too that I wanted to ask, I've thought this, had community members ask, has MnDOT tried to acquire additional land so you can have turn lanes in proper areas? Have you asked anybody for acquisition for additional right-of-way? And let's get it widened out so you can have the 4 lanes and you can also do the right-of-way acquisition.
Do you want me to respond to that? So the corridor study was completed in advance of an urban reconstruction project to align both the surface assets with the underground utilities. That's, you know, MnDOT storm sewer and the city's water main, the city's sanitary systems, right? To kind of get alignment. That really opens it up for opportunities in terms of lane widths, shoulder widths, boulevards, sidewalk, all those kind of things. Yeah, prior to that, that's sort of the question. Right now, we're on the preservation schedule until we can get alignment across those assets, across not only the community of Windom, but the 13-county area we service in terms of system stewardship, in terms of preservation and reconstructions. Well, yeah, and I sort of want to allow Derek a chance to respond to one of the earlier statements if I can, and we can come right back to this.
Yeah, I can mention and talk a little bit about the roundabouts too. So yeah, the discussion of a single lane, what we call, you know, just one circulating lane versus what we call a multi-lane, which is that multiple lanes going through. Typically what we found is, once again, more lanes, more problems. Usually the roundabouts we build with more lanes have far more crashes, sometimes 2 to 3 times more crashes than a single lane roundabout. So that is something that you really want to think about when we consider what type of roundabout to build, is that single lane versus multi-lane. Multi-lanes, we have a lot more operational challenges than we typically do with single lane roundabouts. So.
That being said, I mean, both see some reduction in severity of crashes, correct, Derek?
Yeah. Oh, yes, the severity.
So then just to close the thought with turn lanes and things like that, prior to those reconstruction opportunities, those are really limited in terms of stretching dollars across our system, if that answers your question.
I like the comment about that, it was that Senator Weber asked that question, the response was an opportunity trial. Is that what we said it was? And Whose choice is that?
Yeah, the opportunity was in front of that study to inform the opinion associated with the eventual urban reconstruction project. Ultimately, you know, local input matters in various decisions across multiple elements of projects. I think the thing we're cautioning the whole group on, us and you, is you know, if speeds are concerned and crashes are concerned, this is likely a detriment to go back to that option. So again, there's sort of that friction and tension of, if we do this thing, will it give us the informed results or not?
There was one crash more in the 2 years you looked at. The 17%. There was one crash. Difference. I feel it. I'm back to I'm glad the senator asked that question. And my question is, and I think it's a mutual decision, is that fair to say? Or is it MnDOT's gonna decide whether we have 4 lanes or 2 lanes in the city of Windom? Whose decision is that? We signed on, and our understanding was for a trial, and Ms. Wolf was part of that whole discussion. And I honestly, at that time, I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the trial, but it was on a temporary, as I understood it, for the community. And if I'm wrong, I'd like you to tell me that.
So what we've learned, and we're in, as a part of this study, what has been probably the most alarming is the speed. All right, and the number of people speeding and the amount of speeding. And our concern is to opening that back up to 4 lanes. Does that increase that or sustain that? We'd like to do some things that we can hopefully have an impact on the speed. And I'd like to talk now about, we don't want to jump to solutions, right? But we have a proposal that we'd like to put forward and to attempt to solicit monies for a roundabout at 60 and 71 South. And that's through this Highway Safety Improvement Program. The conversation about the number of lanes, we'll have that conversation and we'll talk about that. But we really would like to, with your consent, is to put in a request, a grant for that grant, those dollars that are associated with spot improvements such as roundabouts. And in so doing, we'd also like you to apply for this grant at the same time that we do, and that actually the time is short, so that we go in this together. And that would help offset the cost of the roundabout. From your perspective, when we talk about, cooperating on costs and things like that, I think that's one thing that we can do on your behalf. And with you being with us there as a partner, saying that this is what we want to have at the south end of our community. We need to have the conversation about single and double, and we will. And we want to work our way through that. I think that the roundabout will also help to direct traffic as you're coming north into town from the south end, and line them up to be able to go into a quick trip better than what we have right now in a roundabout. Keeping the center lane, or keeping that lane open. And roundabouts, as you've seen going through them, they do naturally, they can help, they'll slow down traffic, period. You'll only speed through it once, right? But it does slow down traffic, and it'll be able to better manage the speed in between 62 and 71 and 60 intersection, because people wouldn't be accelerating, only to de-accelerate when they get to that roundabout. So that would definitely help the speed in that segment of the road. And again, coming through, you'll be at a lower speed on the other side of the roundabout and better be able to, for people coming out of a quick trip, to see the speed. The speed would be more consistent coming out of a roundabout. And then we'd think that too would improve traffic and improve drivers' ability to make good decisions based on that. So that is one thing that we're looking for tonight is for, well, we'd like to, we don't want to jump the gun, but we needed to get ready, so we've started looking at what it would take to put in a proposal for
What's the
this.
time frame on that?
Where are we at on that?
Derek can answer this.
Yeah, I manage the program, so the deadline is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so very soon here.
We can do this. We can. And having Derek here, your conversation, that's a good thing.
Is Derek gonna take some time, come down here so he can work with staff to get this application in?
We'll figure out
Or
something and we'll
something.
help you.
Are there particulars of dollar amounts, what all goes into that? What's the match? What, I mean, are we talking out-of-pocket costs for Windom? What,
So
you know.
that's what we'll have to take a look at, but I can't answer that question right now. We don't even, it's a pot of money, and the pot of money, it goes up and down, and depends on how many other people are applying for this particular pot of money. We have been looking out for other buckets of money that have been available through the IIJA and different grant opportunities, and we received some dollars for some other roundabouts through that. Those were rural roundabouts that are literally the ones that are out in a rural setting. Go ahead.
Generally speaking, with MnDOT's cost participation policy, MnDOT pays for the circulatory portion of a roundabout, and then the legs that are on the trunk highway. In this case, Highway 6071 has one local leg outside that circulatory roadway. This potential program we're talking about with Derek has a traditional 90% covered, 10% match program. And so, you'd have to look at those numbers a little more, because it's a portion of a portion, if that makes sense, to understand what that burden would be. But we would share some of that information following this.
I think Steve just asked me, is that the same as a traffic signal? Yeah. All right. Well, I think, to move forward with this and concur, I think the council needs more information, and we don't have a lot of time, right? We'd have to call a special meeting. Is that what would need to happen, or do we just say, go for it?
If their resolution require, if their application,
Yep.
if MnDOT's application cycle requires a resolution, then you would have to have a special meeting because you don't have anything in front of you.
Yeah, Derek, do you recall, I think it's generally letters of support in addition to those applications being submitted, they go hand in hand. Our district would submit for our portion, you would submit for yours through an application process. It typically comes from the city administrator with a letter of support from the community during this phase of it, prior to any sort of commitments being made.
Yeah, usually all we need for the application is just a letter of support. We don't get too into the finite definition of exactly who's paying what and at what percentage and what pennies. That's project development. You guys will hash that out with the district. We'll just come with the funding. We'll just come with the funding amount if you're awarded, and then you kind of work with the district from there. But all we need at that point is just you guys saying we support the project. So.
Okay.
Staff submit an application.
Okay, does the council wish to take that on tonight? I mean, I'm looking for nods. Steve said that the council could pass a motion to authorize the staff to submit an application for some matching funds in partnership with MnDOT.
I for one, 100% believe that the roundabout is the answer out there. Because if it's designed correctly, it will provide a safe exit from Quick Trip, which is the issue. So I would make the motion to go forward.
I would definitely second that.
Okay, the motion was from Marv and seconded by Jenny to have staff prepare the application. Pardon me? And the letter of support, right? Any discussion from the council? And this is not a binding until we see dollars in the pocket here. And the council, I'm sure, will have more questions at that time if this goes through. I appreciate the opportunity. Council ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously as I heard it. There's step one.
As far as the discussion, it seems to come awful fast.
It does.
You know.
It's surprising. No, I agree, but we have waited a long time to have a face-to-face discussion. You know, and not that Ann and her staff hasn't done a good job, but it was totally, at that meeting, was give us back our 4-lane. I mean, that was unprecedented, 99% of our community. And the council's all heard it, I've heard it. Yeah, we want to continue with that. And that's why I asked that question again, is that trial basis on the 4-lane. I just strongly hope the council in the future years will, you know, when we get these dollars and we can build this roundabout, that you will join this council and the new council and the new mayor to participate in those discussions so we understand it. Because that's probably one of the biggest things is not understanding the whole process. When we said temporary, we meant temporary. Let's try it. And our public does not feel it is. And we're representing their voice, right? So this could change things in our community if we can get this rolling sooner.
I believe it will, and there's no doubt from a speed perspective. When I saw those speed numbers and the sheer volume of people that were traveling at that speed, I mean, at that point, you just know that, there, you know, geometrically, and Derek had brought this forward earlier today, you've got the curve coming into town from the south, you've got the curve on 71 coming into town. Those are not beneficial to line of sight and reducing the speed. So when we saw those, it definitely, you know, tipped the scales to say we need to do something, because we know enforcement can't do that. And I think you've all understood and acknowledged that a roundabout can and will reduce speeds. And it will actually do a better job of keeping the speed, you know, at or about, you know, 30 miles an hour in between the 60-71 intersection and the 62 intersection.
I've got one question on the
Sure.
roundabout. If you have 4 lanes on either side of it and you go to a 1 lane in the roundabout, you've built a lot of them that way too, haven't you? I mean, that's probably the best way to go, I would think.
Derek?
We've done multiple approaches. The one folks may be familiar with this past construction season, Highway 14 in New Ulm.
Yeah,
at
I've gone
Highland
through.
Avenue.
I've gone through.
That's an example of one of those.
Those are 4 lanes that go into one lane in the roundabout.
That's an example of one of those.
They're perfect.
I mean, I gotta stop talking when somebody says perfect, so.
Okay, that's first step.
So,
Traffic lights.
so could we stay?
Oh,
Can we stay on the south end for just a little bit longer in speed? We agree with you that we need to do something now. And agree with you that even though we know that your speed is signs can have a temporary effect, it will have an effect. It will show people what their speed is. And we agree with you and would like to partner with you to install those signs. There might be some nuances of that we might want to look at because of the time lag between where we're at now and an intersection that has a roundabout in it. But we believe that, or at least I believe, doing that on both the north and the southbound lanes to help people to understand what their speed is, and it'll at least have that temporary impact of them knowing that. We've shown over time that they don't have a sustained impact, but it just seems like that's the right thing to do, and we'd like to partner with you on that.
Steve wrote a nice thought here is rumple strips or, yeah, traffic calming type things out there. Would that be incorporated, could be in those signage deals? I mean,
We have a couple of different options we could explore. Some that are really quick, short turnaround. Greg mentioned the Your Speed signs. There's times we can do different forms of delineation, either with rumbles or tube delineators. We could also do some pavement reduction in this area to cause less confusion as well, where we remove some pavement to keep it simpler. Okay.
Well, we thought we'd try.
So those are just some things.
okay.
So, just to kind of summarize, with your consent, that we will, and with your letter of support, we will apply for that grant opportunity to receive funds from the Highway Safety Improvement Program. We will sit together and work our way through the conversation about what would be an appropriate design for the roundabout at another day, but I think we're all under the same agreed philosophy that a roundabout, whatever size and shape it is, will impact speed and slow speeds down, and I think that's just a tremendous benefit to the community, and so for people to be able to use the Quick Trip safely. Not trying to count my eggs before I get them, but it just became very clear to us with when we saw those numbers and speed that we needed to look for a revenue source for that.
Is that state or federal money?
That's federal money.
Federal?
Federal, yep. Highway Safety Improvement Program, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Federal money.
It's already, is it federal money that you're applying to the federal government for, or is it federal money you've already got that you have to decide how to divvy it up? I think it's the latter.
It's the latter, yep. We get a, yeah, we get a block grant from the feds, and then they leave it up to the states to figure out how to distribute the funds.
What do you mean it doesn't do us any good?
To-
No,
to
to
get
have
a hold of
Senator
to
lobby?
have Senator Weber talk to Congresswoman Fishbach or anybody like that, because those dollars have already been allocated to the city or
Well,
to the
that's
state.
okay. Senator can still talk to our agency people.
We're counting on
mean,
a delete
we're-
on these folks.
Yeah, and we're very appreciative of you allowing Senator Weber in on some of this discussion.
Mr. Host and I have frequent.
Well, I don't know, to me, that sounds encouraging. Okay,
we're still applying for a grant.
Yep.
And we gotta work our way through it. But it's a positive move forward. I think that if not this pot of money, what would be the next one that we could
Yeah.
look for? And we'll continue to look for that as a part of the tail end of IIJA dollars or other dollars that might become available, so.
Well, thank you for your support on that and bringing that up. Are we ready to move to the traffic lights a little bit, or Jim, you had another question?
Just a thought, what about speed reduction where them 45-mile-an-hour signs are now from both ends? Leaving it at 30, all the way to the top of the hill coming into town, and from where the 45-mile-an-hour sign is leaving town, cut it down to 30.
I guess what I'd like to do is to deploy these "Your Speed Is" signs and see if we get a reduction. Like we said before, if we put out a sign and they don't feel that that's the appropriate speed for the area, they won't travel it. So we like them to be traveling 45 miles an hour, and that would be a great improvement from where we're at right now. And so I'd like to see if we can't get the speeds down with doing this, and then and look at where, and continue to look at what refinements we could do in this intersection in the interim. And, you know, as we've heard you tonight, there's different elements of it that we could go back and take another look at. There is some more delineation that we could possibly do. Delineation is more difficult, obviously, in the snow and ice season, but there might be some delineation we could do during the summer that would be helpful to folks too, so.
Yeah, we have a speed trailer that the chief will, I'm sure, work with you. Yeah, we've had it out many times on the highway until it got hit
Whether we
by
use a trailer or we go to a permanent.
Permanent.
I wouldn't call it permanent because we'd want to take them out in time, but there might be some other options there. We'll take a look at that, but.
Okay. Okay. Ready to move on to the stoplights? Okay. Do you have as good of a proposal as you made here that you've got a grant we can apply for to get that taken care of?
Yeah, so I'm going to summarize just what we had in the letter, and then we can probably talk through some of those options. There's been some concerns raised about cost increases throughout, some concerns felt towards punitive. The nature of that to us was relatively unfortunate as we were gathering more information around design standards, being transparent along the way where we were provided updated costs and what have you. And so in this letter, right, we talk through, it's still a new design standard. There's still projects, and I think, Scott, one's being let this Friday with this new design standard where we'll be able to provide a better refined cost, from a larger sample size to better inform, both us and you as to where these cost estimates continue to fall. We think delaying the project does that, as well as allow you an opportunity time to pursue alternate or additional funding sources for that city's cost share, the signal replacement system. We could talk about the second study as well. I want to be diligent of your time and how much dialogue you want to have on this topic. The short version is MnDOT wouldn't recommend moving from a signal to a two-way stop control, in that we would actually likely see an increase in crashes and delays. And so maybe I'll just pause there on those 2 points.
I think you're absolutely right. The two stop signs didn't make sense. They're the ones that proposed it. No, right. That was
But if you go into this conclusions and the recommendations that this KLJ said, you go to their last paragraph, it says removal is a consideration and always stopped may be a safer alternative than the side street stop control, though it still presents challenges, especially for pedestrian safety. However, it would be the most viable to maintain the traffic signal to ensure the smooth operations and enhancement safety for all users.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look through what our risk-managed approach to the existing signal system is. Folks may have seen our forces out there today where they were working on some overhead lights because luminaires and the wire to them needed some repair. Some of that analysis by KLJ also includes reference to various studies. One of those that talked about going from a signal system to an always stop that actually saw an increase in crashes. And so, again, this is sort of a really limited sample size, and we also want to acknowledge, sensitivities about increases in crashes, notably at intersections where predominantly we're seeing intersection-related crashes along this corridor.
I've noticed in other locations that MnDOT has gone away from stop lights and, like, for example, on Highway 71 and Highway 14.
Yeah,
And that works very well. I like that.
Yeah, the two instances I'm thinking of, the Sanborn Four Corners, we call that at Highway 71 and Highway 14, as well as Highway 5 and Highway 22 in Gaylord. Those were instances where we didn't actually meet what we call signal warrants, and so we had signals that didn't necessarily need to be installed based on that engineering analysis. This analysis shows that right now, 6 of 8 warrants are met, and that's quite a bit. And in the future condition, we always want to be projecting out with the various traffic growth patterns. We meet all 8 signal warrants. And so those instances are pretty different from this one.
Granted, I'm not opposed to stoplights. It'd be the best alternative, but I thought the council was very generous. I voted against it. The funding of the 177,000 before the estimate tripled.
What's your vote now, Dennis?
What?
What's your vote with the increase? Would it be a no?
What's that?
No, I get that. No, I was gonna put you on a spot that you don't wanna pay more, right?
No, I'm not willing to pay more. I never will vote. I thought the council was very generous in supporting that 177,000.
And I think we were,
There's 10 times as many vehicles on Highway 71 as 10th Street, 10 to 15 times as many. And I think I know what your policy is, and I don't agree with it.
yeah. In the information that we sent, I mean, we were given a price, and I thought we, other than Dennis's vote no, we were gonna move forward with that. And then it was, I thought it was a huge surprise to us that we got the letter that the cost was gone up, and that you're only conforming to, I might have this number wrong, but 2018 standards or thereabouts? We're not even up to 2024? That's what
I can maybe speak to it, but I believe we have new signal standards that are being pushed through right now that we're upgrading our signal systems. We don't do it every year, so the last set could have been 2018 standards, but with recent advances in technology and the way we like to manage our signal systems, we have new standards that are coming out, so that would probably be the updated system is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, and to talk about it a little bit previously, right, there was, the federal government was informing us to update it. We asked for some more time, and this was the timing that we did on a statewide basis, which just oddly happened to coincide with this conversation with this community and other communities around the state as well. So again, a couple of projects have been led at this new standard. This is the new standard moving forward if the state wants to continue to have federal funds on projects.
These were standards from 2016.
Thank you, Marv. 2016, and they weren't implemented until a month after we said yes. The city council said, yes, we're gonna fund 170,000 of it, And it changed to double,
It was-
yeah, 420.
About done. So in 2018, the federal government said that you need to change your standard. Part of that is the time that it takes to change the standard, to go back and engineer, see what others are doing, see what's different in the industry, working with industry as to, in terms of the changes that are made. We asked for an extension on that. We hadn't, and a lot of other states hadn't made the change yet, and we received that extension. And it's unfortunate, but we understand that it fell on the projects that are coming out this next year. So in our, we've been on the other side of this, is that we show up with a let cost, and there's an increase too, and that's no fun. When you come to a community and say, we were wrong on our estimate, the cost that is actually showing up in the plan is twice what we said we were, and a community has no time to react and respond. So we're trying to be proactive in letting you know what our current cost estimates are. We're trying to be, that a good partner in keeping you informed. And we're looking forward to the cost of the upcoming lettings for cost. Also in this time frame, steel had gone up quite a bit. That we're starting to see that come down again. There's manufacturing costs associated with the initial installs that are passed along as a part of this increase. So what we're hopeful, as are you, that the cost is going to come down. We're waiting to see what these costs would be, and we'd like to share that with you when we have that opportunity. But we kind of pivoted, right, between, okay, so we're no longer going to be doing the 3-lane, but we do need to do the signal. The signal is at its end of its life, and we're watching it closely. You'll see us out more often than we would look at them once a year. We'll be out looking at the signal more than that to ensure that it's safe. But we think we can extend that a year, and we can see where the cost of things are in a year from now. They might be better, they might be worse, we don't know. But thinking that when contractors and suppliers and manufacturers get more comfortable with the new signal design, there'll be an efficiency based on that. So we can do that. We're taking a risk that we might have to take out the overhead mast, and if we had to, we would go to a cable stayed system temporarily until we get there. We have those, but we don't like to use those just because there's other issues associated with them with over time. So
I said Jenny next, yes, I'll get in trouble.
Yeah. So I just, in looking back through all my notes and all the information, I put together a little timeline just so I have it straight in my head, and I guess more for the public too, so that they're seeing this and you guys are understanding where our frustration is coming from. Because in May of 2024, that's when we were informed that to replace the stoplight was $177,000. Okay, that's what the city's share would be. So we knew that in May. And then in June, on actually June 3rd, the city was awarded $141,600 in a carbon reduction program grant, which we thought then we could use that money to help offset that cost of the stoplight. But then it was made contingent that we had to maintain that 3-lane striping, otherwise we would not get that grant. So that gave us some frustration there. Then the next day, June 4th, that's when we had the DOT, you had your open house, you got public comment. We had our live council meeting, and many people spoke out. Everybody spoke about turning it to 4-lane. And then June 18th, our next meeting, we passed that resolution rejecting the restriping and asking it to be restored. And then from May, June, all that information happening, on August 6th, that's when I have in my notes that the DOT informed the city of the increase of the stoplight to $420,000 for our share, not the whole cost, just our share, which was very, very overwhelming to us. And then in the information that we got, and I'm reading back through it, it says that this is due to new federal standard guidelines, which dated back to 2015 and 16, and that initially you needed to be in compliance by 2019. So, and I know then you requested for it to be longer, but my big thing is, in all these meetings and conversations we had from May to August, nobody said that to us. Nobody said, hey, you know what, something's coming. And I kind of just put this, as an example, like if I went to buy a new car and I'm looking at this car and talking to the salesman and he's like, it's $177,000. And I'm like, okay, well, let me do some figuring. Maybe you need to, check your budget, that kind of stuff. And you come back 2 months later and you're like, okay, I'd like that $177,000 car. And now they say, well, because of some new standards, that car is now $420,000. A good salesman, I think, would have told you when you were in looking at it, you know what, I'd really try to get your funds together and do that today, because in a couple months, there's some changes on the horizon and we're anticipating that cost to go up significantly. So I think the frustration that the city council and city members are feeling is we were given, nothing. We had a lot of communication with a lot of different representatives from the DOT. And I mean, we were looking at 177 as being a huge amount for us as a city. And going through, and then we thought, okay, let's do it. Let's do the 177. We know the stoplight needs to be replaced. And then all of a sudden, this 420 comes out of the sky. And so that's why I just want to let you know that's where all of our frustration came from. And I feel like there should have been some more communication or letting us know that there was big changes happening, because you had to have known that that was going to be some change. You maybe didn't know it was going to be 420, but you knew, with upgrades and changes and prices, it had to be going up. So that, I'm just going to say that's my frustration with it.
I'd just like to throw out a number. If we were to fund that $420,000, we'd have to increase our levy by 16.5%, and that's out of the question. To do that, our levy would have to increase by 16.5%.
Could we, go ahead, Marv.
Well, I was going to echo the same thoughts that Jenny said, but I would take it a little bit further than just frustration. We felt intimidated, plain and simple. And then when the thought came out that, okay, if you don't fund the 420,000, we'll simply remove the traffic control lights and put up stop signs on your 2 legs. That was pure intimidation, we felt. But tonight, sitting down and having working solutions, that's what it takes. And we can get a little more confidence in what you're telling us. So, but that was not a good meeting in sending out that increase to 420,000.
Thank you, Marv. I had a note here to talk about carbon reduction grant. And does that program still exist? Carbon reduction grants?
It does. Yeah, the carbon program reduction is something that your area transportation partnership, the ATP in our area of the state, looks at for any given fiscal year. And then it's interesting, this is sort of a newer federal program where the state is still considering whether or not it's going to do it at an area level or a statewide solicitation. And so during some of that early phase, that was a local subcommittee that said, and to this specific instance, right, you will get carbon reduction based on, I want to almost call it a sophisticated tool or model under a certain scenario. And so that subcommittee said, again, just sort of a separate body provided you with information that said, if we know you're considering some options, maybe it was included in the application. if you do option A, you know, it matters more to us than option B. But yeah, it's still a program, I think, out through fiscal '28 or fiscal '29. And for the state, that goes from July 1st to June 30th. But again, it's federal fiscal, so that's a little different too. But in that time frame, it still exists.
And my follow-up to that is that there could be potential, I would assume a roundabout is slowing down traffic and less carbon. It would be a perfect time to apply for a carbon reduction grant again.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the reason, if I can respond to that.
Yep.
The reason we talked about the safety program is it's sort of an immediate one that's eligible, but there's other programs too. Carbon reduction is a good example. There's a freight program as well that solicits in August that we could look at. Some of those funds have different timing requirements, but this is just sort of the first opportunity along the way.
My next thing is I'd like to recognize Representative Fogelman, who's here. Marge came to catch the tail end of this. Would you like them to repeat everything they said, Representative? Yeah. Did you have any comments that you would like to make? I know you missed a little bit, but.
I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I'm sorry that I was running late, but I just hope that there's something that can be done for all the community of Windom. It needs to get addressed, and hopefully it can be an amicable fix.
Thank you, and I think we made some progress tonight. So, which I really appreciate. So, Scott.
I just got a quick question. For some reason, we leave it to the one lane each direction. You guys still pay for the street lights or the stoplight? Wasn't that one of the proposals that we left it the way it was with the one lane? They would take care of the signal lights for us?
No, if you did 3-lane all the way through town, then the carbon grant would apply, and then we would do that on the lights.
Yeah.
Good try, Scott. No, you got any other? Okay.
As I understand it, that subcommittee, the ATP, once they were under the understanding where the city wasn't supportive of that, they reprioritized those carbon reduction funds to other projects that were also eligible. Does that answer your question, Mr. Pitson? Okay.
Just to follow up on that, my thought about the intimidation of removing those lights, and then much to my surprise, when I'm reading your study, it says that's not feasible to take those lights out. Well, you could have asked anybody in Windom, and you could have saved your study money on that intersection.
We could sell you those results for $50,000. I think we heard that. Okay, Senator.
My question is, what kind of carbon reduction did they estimate there would be because we went down to 3 lanes through the city of Windom?
Yeah, we'd have to go back and look at that tool that ran that analysis, but I don't have those numbers on me right now.
I mean, the basis, if the goal is you're slowing traffic down so you emit less carbon, you're also keeping those vehicles running longer because they're in the city limits longer as they're going through town. You also have people sitting on the side streets waiting to get on probably longer. And I guess I would be very doubtful of their numbers. Let's put it that way.
What we looked at from the initial analysis, and I think we talked about this once, that in the current configuration, a lot of left-turning vehicles do it from the left through lane, and people queue up behind those vehicles. And based on the current volumes through Windom, having dedicated left turn lanes keeps the through traffic moving, and I think that was part of our conversation previously. I think what we'd ask as well, part of I think what we're asking tonight is, a potential delay in this as we see what other projects are doing, and curious your thoughts on that. And then again, just in general, really appreciating the whole conversation tonight and the dialogue around speeds on the south end of town.
I thought I heard you earlier allude to possibly 2-year delay. Is that?
Yeah, in the letter, I think I wrote 1 to 2. Again, from our perspective, it's a signal that's outside of life cycle where there's rusting bases and things like that that require more maintenance and inspection and, just added risk as we see more major climate-related events like we saw in June in the city of Windom and what else there might be. And so, again, from our perspective, sooner rather than later helps reduce or minimize that risk. But yeah, there's certainly some time.
Will you work with city staff to keep them updated on the bids and as they're coming down and as soon as you stop seeing that trend go down and start creeping up, you call us and we'll sign the agreement quick? And I mean, and it's going to take some planning for this council to come up with those kind of dollars. As you said, 16.5% levy increase. Our community's not going to stand for that, or in my opinion. So time, I think, is needed, but keep in touch. However you do that with your bids coming in, that we could be put on a mailing list of your bids and.
Yeah, other than echoing the points that Greg previously brought up with, newer technologies and newer things and efficiencies, one of the things I do got to acknowledge, though, is generally we do see some inflation year to year in terms of construction cost as it relates to just the industry in general. We've definitely seen a cooling of that over the last 1 to 2 years compared to prior to that. But I just want to acknowledge that risk too.
And
I'd hate to come, in 2 years and say it's also a little higher because of this.
But I would say we've had an overhaul in the way that federal government anyway is going to be run, and we could see a cooling trend on some of this large inflationary numbers as well. So I'd just say that as it could go either way. Okay. Anything further from our guests or senator or representative?
Thank you for.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting the meeting. Thank you, staff, for coming down and working with people of Windom and the council to get this done. Obviously, there's a lot of cooperative efforts need to be made. So, thank you.
And one final comment I'd like to make on Highway 6071. I cannot remember the years, but I know that I was in grade school and drove through to Minneapolis on Highway 60. And that was the longest darn trip I've ever made on a 2-lane road with traffics and through every single town. And our representatives and senators fought for a 4-lane all the way through. And we sat out here a couple of years ago and did the dedication at the Bergen corner, I believe it was, or not Bergen, Bingham Lake, thank you, Bingham Lake. And we sat out there on the pavement and everybody was congratulating everybody and we finally got a 4-lane done. It seems ridiculous to move it down to 2 lanes. That's my point. So I know there's reasons, but that's my final comment of this evening. Thank you all. Okay.
And I just
Very
want to
good.
thank you for this opportunity to discuss this with you. Much appreciated.
And I think retroactively, I mean, we appreciate you guys coming down and when? When on the 4-lane? I've already got my answer, but yeah, when's the definitive on the 4-lane? Can we target somewhere let's get this decision made?
So, again, what we want to do is try to do some of these other solutions. Our concern is opening it up to the 4-lane without trying to reduce the speeds. And if we can get speeds down and if we can get this roundabout in here, we'll get the speeds down and where we need to be, and then we can look at what are the configurations of things then. That's our fear, that's our concern, based on the trends that we see statewide. And we appreciate that we now know and understand the connecting to the 4-lane. There's no doubt about that. I've been unfortunately, with MnDOT, I shouldn't say unfortunately, I just feel old these days, I don't know. I've been with MnDOT for 37 years, and I've been a part of a lot of that construction of those 4 lanes, and I'm as proud of that as I think everybody else is. But our concern is if we can't do something with traffic to slow them down, to get them so that if they were coming in at a good speed, it probably wouldn't even be an issue. And with the change in the traffic patterns on the south end of town at Quick Trip, we needed to do something so that we could provide some of that dedicated movement to get people in and out. So, again, I think that's our concern, is opening it up and not being able to control the traffic or the speed of traffic. So let's try to work together to get the speed down. If we can get the speed down, then we can make it maybe the next, in place change there. And then let's see if we're able to get this grant, and really that, at the end of the day, that is the one engineering item we can do that will change behavior. So.
That's a good summation. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you. And thank you to Senator and Marge, Representative. Appreciate you coming down. Okay. We are on to the public hearing. Miscellaneous special assessments. You know what? I see this going on for at least another half an hour.
Yep.
I'm gonna take a 5-minute recess. Council okay with that? All right, we're recessed for 5 minutes. Okay, we are reconvened, and I gotta get my glasses on.
Miscellaneous special assessments.
Miscellaneous special assessments, all right. Steve, give us the lowdown, this is kind of our annual cleanup deal.
Yep, this is something you do every year. Miscellaneous special assessments are for unpaid fire calls or snow removal that we had to do, or cutting lawn grass where we've sent the invoice to the property owner. Property owner hasn't paid that, and so we have the opportunity to assess it to their property taxes. So this needs to be approved and then sent to the county auditor for inclusion in that process. So tonight is the public hearing in case any of the property owners that are having the assessments placed on their property have questions, comments.
Okay, so the order of business here is to, the residents who have these special assessments have been notified. There is a resolution in our packet, and prior to that, we are gonna open a public hearing to hear any comments from anybody on the list. That public hearing is open. Is there anybody who wishes to talk on behalf of their special assessments they may have on their property? Anyone in the public would like to comment? Please do so now. One more call for public comment. And Steve just notified me, no written objections to the assessments. So we have a resolution before us, and I'm gonna close the meeting, the public hearing. We are now back into regular council session. Council wish to take action on the miscellaneous special assessments.
I would move to adopt the resolution adopting the assessment rule.
I'll second.
Resolution introduced by Marv and seconded by Jim. Any discussion? Steve, a roll call, please.
Esplin.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
Nelson. Grunig.
That resolution carries. There is now a resolution designating the annual polling place as in your packet. This resolution is setting, pardon me?
Annual housekeeping.
Annual housekeeping, Steve says. Council wish to take action? Hearing none, I guess you don't have a place to vote next year.
I'll introduce the resolution.
I'll second it.
All right, resolution introduced by Dennis, second by Scott. Any discussion? Once again, a roll call.
Nelson. Quaid.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Grunig. Esplin.
That resolution carries. Resolutions accepting donations. Barb Elston, supplies for the library activities, one at a time, Steve?
Yes,
We
sir.
got resolutions. I believe that is a $50 contribution to the library.
I'll introduce that resolution.
I would second.
Resolution introduced by Dennis, second by Marv. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, a roll call, please.
Grunig. Benson.
Yes.
Quaid.
Yes.
Esplin.
Yes.
Nelson.
And that resolution carries. Linda Ebling and Susan Ebling in memory of Wanda Turner for library books.
I would introduce that resolution.
I'll second.
Resolution introduced by Marvin, seconded by Jenny. Is there any questions? Seeing none, have a roll call, please.
Benson.
Yes.
Esplin.
Yes.
Nelson. Quaid.
Yes.
Grunig.
Next topic, number 8 is Island Park flooding. And I'm gonna hand this next one off, the Burbach Aquatics Pool Inspection Proposal. A copy of that is in your packet. However, we are gonna let Steve give a little background and explanation on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Tim Hogan, our rec director, had obtained the inspection quote from Burbach. Burbach is a aquatics firm that we had previously engaged to do the pool feasibility study. So after the flood, we need a inspection of the pool to show to FEMA essentially about the damages that were in the flood caused at the pool. And so, and that's to do with all the underground piping and all of the pumps, the mechanicals and the filters and all the things to do with it, in addition to, the bowl and heaters and those kind of things. So Tim finally did get the inspection proposal from Burbach. Just to do the inspection, they're asking for $97,620 to do the inspection, which is a pretty high number. Now, if there's flood damage to the pool, which we suspect there is, and we can show it through this damage assessment, FEMA will likely cover the cost of the inspection because they can't send a site inspector out to see underground piping and those kind of things, so they need this kind of more in-depth inspection, okay? The FEMA representative was in town today going over some of our expenses. I shared this with him and let him know it was coming, and he said it's kind of above his pay grade a little bit. This is a very high dollar number, and he said he would not want the city to take the risk of having this completed and not being FEMA eligible for reimbursement. So to err on the side of caution, what he was going to do is forward this to his superiors, get their thoughts and their approval essentially on it, and then get that back to us so we would have an answer on whether it's FEMA reimbursable pretty much for sure or not before we take this next step. So I'm going to ask that you postpone reviewing this Burbach proposal until your next council meeting. So that would be the action that I'm asking for you tonight, and I think there's pretty sound reasoning on that.
I was gonna, is there any discussion before I entertain a motion? The motion that I was going to entertain is that the council take action to move this to the next council meeting, which would be December 3rd.
I'll make such a motion to move the Burbach study to December 3rd.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Scott, and a second by Dennis, or Jim. Any discussion? I think it's a good move. That's a lot of money. So be anxious. Yeah, Steve read him a check. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. Levy concepts, that was in your packet. This one's a little cheaper.
Okay. All right, I tried to boil this whole discussion down into something that was summarizing the discussions you've had and kind of guiding everyone through kind of where the council's been and what the process is. So just bear with me for a minute in the memo. So when we had the flooding occurring, the council expressed some interest at those meetings to do something to mitigate future flooding. One of those thoughts was to put an earthen levee through Island Park, kind of behind the homes, and go from Highway 62 right-of-way over to the Highway 6071 right-of-way behind the pool, and kind of go to where that Education Minnesota building is. And so that levee, we had some discussion with the local contractor, felt it could be built for probably $175 or less. And so the council's decision at that time was, when that material was removed for the temporary levee that was on Highway 60, that clay berm we had there, to keep that material for future use in the park to build some type of levee. And so you can see that that was kept. The sandbags, large sandbags, are also kept because the Army Corps of Engineers said, well, if you build a levee, there's a possibility you can use that material as well. So we kept them both just to cut costs if that was the direction council so chose. So we then started DGR to making a couple of concepts. One of those concepts, as noted, was the initial discussion the council had about putting a berm through Island Park behind the private residences, and then emerge over by the Education Minnesota building. And so that's kind of shown here on the right side of the screen. That would be at 1354 elevation. So it's approximately 4 or 5 feet high. If you're standing out there, it'd be, you know, about up to your chin, more or less high. So that's the concept that was put in. That's labeled Concept 1. And then there was some discussion by the council and the public about, well, should a larger levee be looked at to protect Island Park in its entirety from flooding and saving the ball field and things like that. And so we thought, well, okay, as long as DGR was kind of just plotting these out and giving us some ideas and concepts, they took that and made that Concept 2. And so that's the larger levee berm that you see running along the riverbank. Now that particular concept number 2 is 100% in the floodway. And there's a huge difference between the floodplain and the floodway. The floodway is kind of where the river flows and where there's current and those kind of things. And so being in the floodway takes a whole new level of regulatory oversight. DNR would have quite a bit of say in that, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Whereas the Concept 1 levee is in the floodplain, and that would need, we have a general permit from the DNR to do work. We'd need a site-specific permit to do this, but we'd also need to follow the floodplain ordinance, which the city has and enforces, and the Planning and Zoning Commission then would be involved in, they would need to put a conditional use to allow that berm to be built, because it's more than 1,000 cubic yards in the floodplain. But those would be the two approvals that are needed, is that DNR site-specific permit and then the conditional use permit from the city's Planning and Zoning Commission with approval by the council. So that's really these two concepts. Now, if you do Concept 1, it doesn't preclude continuing to work on Concept 2 if that's what the council, you know, would so choose. But that's as I mentioned, a much longer regulatory period, review period, studies in that. So what's kind of in front of you at this time is kind of concentrating on that Concept 1, whether you want to move forward with that or not. As I mentioned, the cost was estimated by a local contractor at $175 or less. We would still have to get a second quote on that to comply with state statute. We would need the DNR site-specific permit and the conditional use permit, and then be able to use that material that we've got stockpiled down at the Island Park. Now, in further review of that material stocked at the park, SEH, our engineers, is advising we probably should not use the sandbags because we can't account for the integrity of the sandbag itself. And sand is porous and whatnot, so if you had a failure, that would be catastrophic. So they're recommending that that not be used. So that will be one of the other. Yeah, we can remove those off-site and have that as a reimbursable through FEMA. So we kept it in the event we could use it. It turns out we maybe can't use it, so we can get that out of there. So if that's council's direction, we would take that to remove those sandbags.
Does that have to be landfilled since it has?
Yes, it'd have to be landfilled because it was subject to floodwater. That's correct. So, so that's kind of where we're at tonight, is looking for council direction on this Concept 1. Part of Concept 1, the DNR suggested very strongly that a hydraulic study is done showing the impact. It's not a no-rise certificate that's needed, but we would have to have some type of study to show we're not, you know, flooding other adjacent properties and what would happen if this levee were placed. We did talk to SEH. That letter is in your packet as well. They did our Perkins Creek floodplain study and all that, so they're quite familiar with our community. And so they estimated the cost of that hydraulic study at $10,000. The city council in your budget meetings for 2025 budget, you earmarked $10,000 for that engineering study. And so knowing just kind of the timing of that, it's going to take a while to have that study completed, and then we're in November now. So that's one of the questions is, would you like to start us engaging SEH so they can get that study underway, so we can have that information when we go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, if the council wants to move ahead with this, or do you want to wait till after the first of the year, or, you know, just kind of that timing issue. So maybe that's enough things on your plate to ask questions on, so.
Could you repeat that, please? No, I'm kidding. No, the one question I had, though, about the 175,000. I'm trying to recall the budget number, if any, for the 175,000.
The council didn't budget any dollars for
And
that.
that is what the council needs to consider, because if you do the hydraulic study for the $10,000, you know, that has to be done, and someone's gonna have to find funding. That was one of the priority things that we looked at, is to help mitigate that whole, southern end of town, is to keep water out of the businesses. It came up to Duffy's, you know, area, and the homes down there that had thousands of sandbags, in that area too. So, you know, think beyond this. I know we need the study done, but then please work hard to get that thing built. You know, this is, I think it's a time saver and we have many other projects within our community. Everybody knows that. So, what's your council thoughts? Any comments first before we vote, Marv?
I guess,
In the concept one levy approval process, is there a public hearing involved?
With the conditional use permit, there is a public hearing.
Good question, Dennis?
I guess I can probably think of a means of funding that, but I don't wanna talk about it right now. I could talk about it to Steve. What's that? Well, you know where my thought was.
I'd encourage you to talk with Steve if you have some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, if we got a couple of years down the road to worry about that, that might be an option. What's that? I think that could be an option.
Okay.
You know?
Scott?
Could we get any money from FEMA, as far as money's putting that levy in to save that part of town?
Not for this levy, no, because it's not to mitigate. I mean, you won't do it for a letter map revision to change the floodplain. This is a earthen berm, essentially, kind of like the one that runs behind some of those houses going north from Highway 62. That's not a certified levy or anything like that. It's a local levy, and that's 100% up to us.
Are you sure you can't use mitigation money to,
It won't meet the standards for mitigation.
a different entity that I work for is building a road so we can get equipment in and out?
This isn't getting equipment in and out.
No, I know, but I can still use mitigation funding. I'm just curious on if there was any.
We asked him and he said no, so.
Okay. Well, then you got the answer.
We asked the question.
Okay.
Jenny's got a question.
Jenny, please.
Okay, so if we fund and do the hydraulic study, then, is there a time frame on how quickly that would need to be completed then? Or is the study only good for so long and then it would have to be, you know, like, how soon do we have to have the 175 then to get it completed?
That's gonna be a question for Andy, who's standing back here, because it'll depend on how long can you give on a conditional use permit to have it constructed? Do you recall? That's what I thought. So there's your answer, I think, Jenny, once it's approved.
Yeah, I think the thought that this council previously had was, how quick can you get it built? I think was your intent, and so that's kind of just maybe, I don't want to say the aggressive timing, but if planning and zoning has this in January or February and could make it, you know, a decision if they approved it, I think the DNR permit would come fairly quickly to do that. That I was hoping that this could get built maybe by March before the ground thaws. Because once the ground thaws, then you're gonna have a muddy mess in there and you might have to wait till later in the year to do it, but, well, snow's
We got a
okay.
good street
We have a
department,
good
though.
contractor, yeah, I can get it, yeah. But I mean, that's a decision for the council, is if you choose to move forward with it, if P and Z, and, I mean, so there's a lot of steps along the way, so right now is, do you want to, as a council, move forward with this process? If so, do you want us to engage SCH? That's kind of the first question, so.
And then, yeah, and then follow up and send it to conditional use hearing. Then you'll have public comment as well. Make the decision, and you guys will decide next year how you're gonna fund it. Okay. So, first, SEH, does council feel comfortable moving forward with about a $10,000 bill and to do the hydraulic study, which is needed before you can do anything else?
I'll make the motion to do the study, because without it, we're gonna flood again. If, it's not a matter of when, or if, it's a matter of when we're gonna flood again. And if it will save some businesses and some homes, that's a cheap price we'll pay. So I'll make the motion to do the study.
And I would second.
Motion by Scott, seconded by Marv to approve the hydraulic study through SEH. Any discussion for the comments? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
So when we get that information, we'll start the conditional use permit probably process with planning and zoning, get some more engineering specs from DGR and keep that process moving if that's your intent.
I think that's the intent of the council at this time, is that we're gonna follow this through. Okay. The next item is a personnel item. Building official. With council approval, I believe that we may have a building official, and Marv is the chairman of that personnel committee. So Marv, it's all yours.
Well, the Personnel Committee received 4 applications. We interviewed 2 people, and Mr. Fast was well qualified, we thought. So we made the approval and recommend his hiring, and we asked the city administrator to put together the contract, which you see in your packet. So I would make the motion to approve the hiring of Matthew Fast as our new building official.
I would second. Oh,
Well, Jenny can have it.
Marv made the motion. I'm gonna take Jenny's because she's on the personnel. That's the only reason, Jim. Okay,
Is he a local person?
yes, fairly local,
Oh, Butterfield,
Butterfield
okay.
area. Very intelligent, worked construction like forever, coming back to the area for family reasons. Different things, just an all-around good person the way he seems. Scott?
Will Andy be around to help him get started?
10-4.
Okay. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, where was I? We had a motion and a second? Yes. And now we were in the discussion. Hearing no more, it's a good hire. Feel comfortable about this. So all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. Very good. The Park and Recreation Coordinator, that's gonna be put on hold as well. That was a placeholder in case that happened. New business. Anybody have any new business tonight? Any old business? I want to thank the council. That was some good discussion, good questions from everyone regarding the MnDOT stuff. I think you presented yourselves very well, and I appreciate that. Council comments? Let's go with Jim. Are the fish biting, Jim?
concerned with. It kind of, I think that when we requested to have that put on the ballot for the tax, I think that it was not properly given out to people. I mean, I don't think they realized what it was. They didn't stop to think that it was, I shouldn't say it, but I hate to think that Ward 2 hates Ward 1, but that's almost the way it seemed. That tax would have only been on there until we reached that amount that we needed to do this mitigation. And I don't know, it's kind of bad. It's kind of bad. We don't look out for our neighbors that well. But anyway, that's just all I had to say.
Thank you, Jim, and I'm glad you brought it up because I do think, I thought the Citizen did a very good article on it. A question and answer with Steve was basically what it is. We're not allowed to advocate for the proposed referendum like that, but I think in a lot of people I think knew about it, but to the degree where we had an abundance of voters and not everyone likely knew about it, right? So I think that, you know, I think the council, the future council can decide, but I hope you really consider is putting it forward again in a year and do it in the, we went a little bit out of order. And part of that is public notification. Let's talk about that now and move forward and ask the state of Minnesota to approve it in the order that it's supposed to be done, but to put it on and get the permission from the legislature for us to put, or for you to put this on the ballot in 2 years, 26. So then the council cannot employ a committee or anything like that to go out and advocate for you. But I think if there are residents in these flooding areas, they can advocate for this, for the money, so you have a resource to pull from for funding. You know, I think that's what it's gonna be about, if you wanna get all these projects done. So I think it was a good question on the ballot. I just don't, I agree with Jim. I don't think everybody understood it. So, thank you for bringing it up, Jim. And Marv is second.
It'll be interesting to see where this MnDOT discussion goes in the next year or so.
We'll have fun watching it, won't we, Marv? Dennis? Scott?
I just want to thank everybody that turned out for the meeting tonight, and the MnDOT people for coming down and talking to us, and the senators and stuff that came down to talk to us in our little town here. And everybody's not going to agree the way it went, and I'm not a good person to say it good went bad or it went good. Just want to say that everybody's trying their best to get this taken care of. And with that, I want to say, make sure Windom's a pretty neat little community. We all take care of each other. We all help each other out. So just be kind to each other and understand that we are, as a councilors, trying our best to do what we can for what we got here. And just take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Jenny?
I just want to wish everybody a happy and safe Thanksgiving holiday weekend coming up, and remind people to shop local, and you're visiting family and friends that are coming in, help them to shop local as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Steve, anything tonight?
Just thanks to the council for the discussion with MnDOT, and I think you're probably gonna have to press them a little harder on coming up with a firm decision on when they're going to put the highway back to 4 lanes, but that will be up to you.
And as I understood it, I think they want to put it off until the roundabout, which is 2 years down the road or better. So, Yeah, I think the council will address that and let the new council come in and you guys will have new ideas and go from there. Okay. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone coming up, from everyone here at City Hall, the council, and we are adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you.